Several years ago, I was training pro-life students in the art of pro-life persuasion. And we happened to be down in downtown Portland, and we were looking for abortion choice advocates in order to talk to them and be able to have a chance to practice the skills that we had learned earlier in the day. It happened to be our lucky day because there was a Planned Parenthood employee, and for those of you who don't know, Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in America. So there was this Planned Parenthood employee. She was out on the street corner. She was raising funds for Planned Parenthood. So wanting to be a good teacher, I decided, well, I want to model for my students kind of what it's like to go and talk to abortion choice advocates. So I went and approached her and started a conversation with her. And very quickly, it became clear that I was pro-life. Now, to my surprise, she said, "Oh, I'm glad you're pro-life." She says, "Our mission is just like that of yours." She goes, "Our mission is to ensure that the life of every born baby is good." So I went ahead and clarified and said, well, yeah, I too want to ensure that the life of babies are good, whether they're born or unborn. And it was at that point she said to me, "I'd like to know from you, how many babies have you adopted?" Now, this is a common challenge raised by abortion choice advocates. It's a simple one to respond to, but it's rhetorically powerful, at least on their part, because there's this temptation by pro-lifers to want to answer the question and say, well, I haven't adopted any babies, assuming that's the situation. And of course, when you say that, it makes it sound like all you care about are unborn babies, you don't care about born babies, and you certainly don't care about the women who are, of course, born and alive and having to care for these babies. Now, I want to offer two responses to this challenge. Here's the first response. How many babies you've adopted has absolutely nothing to do with the morality of abortion. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that I haven't adopted any babies, which, by the way, was the case when I was talking to that Planned Parenthood employee. Well, let me ask a simple question. How does me not adopting any babies justify anyone killing them? Right? That's a non sequitur, right? It doesn't follow that me being unwilling to adopt children means that we can kill these children. What this challenge does is illegitimately shift the discussion from the morality of abortion and whether it's okay to kill innocent human beings that are unborn to the possible solutions offered by the pro-lifer. It's clever rhetoric, but it's bad logic. And the way to illustrate that it's bad logic is to take the roof off, or as they say in Latin, reductio ad absurdum. This is the idea of simply assuming or agreeing with the logic of the person who's making an argument, then following that logic to its logical conclusion, and then if it leads to something ridiculous, some absurd conclusion, then we can reject the logic that led to that conclusion. For example, imagine when during our country's history, slavery was permitted. At that point, if you were against slavery, would it make sense for somebody to say, well, you can't oppose slavery unless you're willing to hire my ex-slaves to be employed in your business? That wouldn't make any sense, right? It's permissible to be opposed to slavery regardless of whether you're willing to hire all these ex-slaves. Or suppose you're against prostitution. Would it be reasonable for someone to say, well, you have no business opposing prostitution unless you're willing to take in these prostitutes and have them live in your home? Whether or not I or any other pro-lifer is willing to or has ever adopted any babies has nothing to do with the morality of abortion or whether I can make a case against abortion or not. Now, the second response is to point out that this challenge presumes that pro-lifers are doing nothing to care for born babies or their mothers. And this is completely untrue. Every state I travel to, I find people and churches and families and nonprofit organizations taking their time, their energy, and their money and caring for born babies and for their mothers, many of them who are single mothers. I see them even taking care of women who have had abortions, right? These are women who've actually made the decision to do the thing that pro-lifers are completely opposed to. And yet they are providing post-abortive care for these women, counseling and other sorts of care. It turns out there are more pro-life pregnancy resource centers that care for women and their children than there are abortion clinics that kill unborn children and harm their mothers. So Planned Parenthood says that they have about 700 abortion clinics around the country in the United States. And according to other estimates, we know there's probably about 1,100 additional abortion clinics, which puts the total of abortion centers around 1,800. Now, if you combine the three major pregnancy resource center networks, you have a total of about 2,500 pregnancy centers that are caring for women, mothers, and their children. So that's 1,800 abortion clinics compared to 2,500 care centers. And the National Council for Adoption estimates that at any given time in the United States, there's approximately 1 million families that are trying to seek to adopt a child. And here's the thing, pro-lifers aren't just willing to adopt healthy babies. Many of them are even willing to adopt babies that have serious medical conditions, like things like spina bifida. One pro-life Christian couple I know just last year pursued adopting a child, and they insisted on only adopting a child that had Down syndrome. And by the way, they succeeded. So it's just plain false that pro-lifers are unwilling to care for born children or their mothers. The whole challenge is simply a smokescreen to hide the morality of abortion. In fact, Greg Kokel, my friend and boss, was on the radio many years ago, and he had a caller call in and say to him, because he was having a segment or speaking on a segment on abortion, asked him, well, what are you doing for women who are forced to carry their child to term? Now, Greg clarified and said to her, look, before I answer your question, which I'm willing to do, I just want to point out that the answer to my question has no bearing on whether abortion is moral or not. But nevertheless, let me go ahead and give you my answer. Greg answered, look, we've actually adopted 2 children who were born from women that were facing crisis pregnancy centers. Is that good enough? He asked. Well, of course that wasn't good enough, and so the woman responded by saying, well, what are you doing for the babies that don't get adopted? So Greg answered and said, well, actually it turns out that my wife works with single moms and their born children and helps care for them at a pregnancy resource center. And he said, in addition to that, my wife runs a single mom's care group. Is that good enough? Oh, and by the way, Greg continued, he says, we personally support crisis pregnancy centers or pregnancy resource centers. And in addition to that, he said he travels around the country and actually raises support at these fundraising banquets for pregnancy resource centers all around the country. Is that good enough? Of course she wasn't satisfied, because nothing will ever be good enough. Why? Because the challenge is a red herring. Abortion choice advocates simply want to shift the attention from their own personal views on abortion to the alleged inconsistency of pro-lifers. The truth is that abortion is a serious moral wrong because it kills an innocent human being. Period. The rest of the truth is that pro-lifers are working hard to stop abortion while simultaneously caring for mothers who've decided to have abortion, caring for mothers who decide to keep their children, and then also caring for the children that are born from these mothers. That's pro-life, and that's consistent.